And the record option is available to you?
Yes, I have started recording.
Right now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Please, we would require to later edit it. Anyway, Vignesh, admit the rest of the participants now. We'll start at 5 o'clock sharp.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Rao, sir. Good evening, rather.
Good afternoon. So, very good gathering. 64, 71.
Yes, sir, we'll cross 100, don't worry. Vignesh?
Yes, sir.
Vignesh?
Yes, sir.
At 5 o'clock when we start, mute everybody except for you and Raja, sir.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Shivam sir, just a request. If Raja sir could be made the co-host, it would be great.
Okay, I'll do that. You cannot do it, Vignesh?
No, sir. I'm also co-host. That's why, sir. We can only have one host, and remaining
Okay.
can co-host, sir.
1 second. Yeah, I'll do that.
Shivam sir,
Yes.
I
Shreya?
also need to be
Yeah.
made co-host. I'm so sorry for bringing this up little late, but
No problem. I'll just do that.
हो गया
Shreya, just see if you're the co-host now.
I am, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Vignesh Ribeiro sir has also joined. I'm making him the co-host as well.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
He's just coming, Shivam.
Yes, ma'am. No problem. Actually, we are muting everyone apart from the speakers. That's why we are giving co-host rights, to certain people.
You can also encourage people to put on their videos. It's
Yes, ma'am.
nice for Mr. Raja to see some faces he's talking to.
Yes, ma'am.
yes
Vignesh, can we start now?
Sure, sir.
Okay, please proceed. Raja sir, can we start now?
Yes, we can start.
Okay.
Sure, sir. Greetings to good evening and greetings to everyone. I'm Vignesh Narayan, PCGT Campus Ambassador from Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Law. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome here our speaker for the day, Mr. VP Raja sir, Dr. Ajay Patil sir, our principal, Mr. J.F. Ribeiro, founding trustee of Public Concern for Governance Trust, and Mrs. Asha Patil, Assistant Registrar, Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Law, Professor Purnima Surve ma'am, our faculty in charge, and all other esteemed dignitaries, trustees, and all the participants and staff of D.Y. Patil College of Law. Today, the topic for the webinar is relevance of ethics in personal and professional life. I would like to begin by introducing our college, Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Law. Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Law is a premier education institute which aims at producing advocates and not merely law graduates. The main goal of our college is to make the maximum possible contribution towards extending and enhancing the quality of advocacy and to provide free legal aid to poor and needy people. We would like to introduce our principal, Dr. Ajay Patil, sir. Dr. Ajay Patil, sir, holds a PhD in custodial deaths in India along with an LLM. Sir is also a member of Academic Council of Dr. D.Y. Patil University, as well as a legal advisor to D.Y. Patil Group. I'd like to proceed on to introducing Public Concern for Governance Trust. Public Concern for Governance Trust is a registered trust founded by Mr. Julio Ribeiro, Dr. R.K. Anand, and late B.G. Deshmukh to increase public participation and activism towards creating a more transparent and efficient governance system in order to sensitize and mentor the youth for governance program. In order to sensitize and mentor the youth for governance program, in the year 2012, in further
Vignesh, you are on mute.
uh, good evening, good evening to one and all. Am I audible?
Yes, Vignesh, yes, continue. Yes, Vignesh, continue.
Yes, ma'am. We would further like to proceed ahead with the introduction of our college, Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Law. Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Law aims at producing advocates and not mere law graduates. The main goal of our college is to make the maximum possible contribution towards towards extending and enhancing the quality of advocacy and to provide free legal aid to poor and needy people. We would like to introduce our principal, Dr. Ajay Patil, sir. Dr. Ajay Patil, sir, holds a PhD in custodial death in India along with an LLM. Sir is also a member of Academic Council of D.Y. Patil University. Sir is also an legal advisor to D.Y. Patil Group. I would like to now proceed to introduce the Public Concern for Governance and Trust. Public Concern for Governance and Trust is a registered trust founded by Mr. Julio Ribeiro, Dr. R.K. Anand, and late B.G. Deshmukh to increase public participation and activism towards creating more transparent and efficient governance system in order to sensitize and mentor the Youth for Governance program in the year 2012. In further to its vision and mission, PCGT has created a leadership opportunity for young college-going students in Mumbai and Pune through Campus Ambassador program. Now, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce the speaker for the day, which is Mr. VP Raja sir. Mr. VP Raja sir was an IAS officer of the Maharashtra cadre. He worked in various assignments at district, state, and center in recognition to his outstanding contribution to administrative reforms while working as a collector of Satara and Transport Commissioner of Maharashtra. Mr. Raja sir was awarded the Distinguished Government Administration Award with the Government of India. Sir has also worked with the Ministry of Human Resource Development, the Ministry of Defense, and the Department of Atomic Energy. He was also a part of appraisal committee of the Ministry of Environment and Forest. He also was the chairman of Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission for 5 years. Before we proceeded, a general instruction that please do not unmute yourselves, and it is recommended to keep your video on. Over to you, sir. Sir, hello.
No, no,
Are you supposed to speak?
no. I will not ask.
Are you sure?
What is the meaning of co-host? You made me to.
so that you can unmute. Otherwise, you can't unmute yourself.
Hello.
Raja sir, you're on mute.
Okay.
As participants.
I'm happy to see Mr. Ribeiro, our other colleague trustees, the principal of the college, Dr. Ajay Patil, Professor Purnima Surve, other faculty and students, not only from D.Y. Patil College of Law, but from various colleges. I've been requested to talk about the relevance of ethics and values in personal and professional life. Ethics and values is something about which everybody has some idea. Actually, one doesn't have to study it, because almost even at a very young age, even when you're in school or even in pre-primary, you know that something is right and something is wrong. So there is a sense of right and wrong which occurs in every human's mind, and it continues. Ethics deals with trying to systematically analyze, well, what is right, what is wrong. There are some theories of it which we'll come to in a very short while from now. But the point I want to make is that everybody does have a sense of right and wrong. And that is what ethics deals with. But each one of you attending this today's webinar, ask yourself in the mind, in your own life, the occasions when you have felt that, well, I should not be doing this, but I feel like doing it. Or perhaps as students of around 18, 19, 20 or 21, occasions when you've done something, but you won't like your parents to know about it. You would like it to be kept to yourself, or what you call as secret, which you won't like others to know about. Now, those are the instances when you already started facing what can be called as an ethical dilemma. You've done something about which you're either feeling a little guilty, or you don't want everybody to know about what you've done. It could be an indiscretion. It could be something which you know is wrong, but you wanted to experiment. It is that curiosity, ho jai kind of thing. So that's the second point I want to make. You also start facing what can be called as ethical dilemmas quite early in life. And these ethical dilemmas will continue throughout your life, both in your personal life and in your professional life, irrespective of the kind of profession that you choose. But whenever you're faced with such an ethical dilemma, which means, should I do this or should I do that? Is A the right option, or B the right option, or C the right option? I wish I had some method of deciding that. But there's a second issue. You may decide that A is the right option, and having decided that, you may go ahead and do B. That is just merely having a rule which helps you to say what is right and wrong is necessary but not sufficient, because you may end up doing this other thing. And what is that comes? Temptation. I think it was Oscar Wilde who said, I can resist everything except temptation. There is a story which all of you would have heard of a king on a new moon day, on an Amavasya day. He wanted to test the honesty of all his subjects. A small kingdom, let's say of about 2,000 people. and he had a tank in his palace, which was completely dry. And he said, I want every citizen, every subject of my kingdom to come in the night on that Amavasya day and pour a glass of milk in my empty tank. Next morning, the king finds that the entire tank is full of water. The reason is everybody in their own mind argue, since others will be pouring milk, if I pour a glass of water, it won't be noticed. The king will not be able to find out who poured the glass of water because others have poured milk. And this, according to me, summarizes the ethical problem with human beings. Many human beings will like to be honest to the outside world, but internally, they may end up making decisions which follow what the king found of his subjects. That's why the second aspect of ethics is equally important, which is often referred to as the philosopher's stone in the professional study of ethics. Anyway, to assure you, let me tell you, even today, there is no right answer for this. There have been a lot of, ever since humanity started, in all civilizations of the world, Indian civilization, Chinese civilization, Middle East civilization, Western civilization, everywhere, philosophers, thinkers, academicians have been asking this question and writing about it. They have brought out various, what can be called as theories of ethics. And actually, all these theories of ethics that exist in the entire world, in all civilizations, can broadly be categorized into three compartments. In the first compartment, they're called the so-called deontological theories of ethics. Deontological theories of ethics. These are the set of theories where the focus is action. You're caught in an ethical dilemma, and what is uppermost in your mind is, how should I act? What should I do? And you're facing a dilemma. So the deontological theories try to answer that question by telling you, ask yourself, ask your inner voice, what is my duty? What is my duty at this, in the given circumstance? In India, we'll call it, what is my dharma? During the 2002 Gujarat riots, Atal Bihari Vajpayee advised the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, Mr. Narendra Modi, follow Raj Dharma. What is the Raj Dharma? Follow that. So, duty. What is my duty at this point of time? Whoever you are, whatever position you may be a chartered accountant, you may be a lawyer. Prashant Bhushan at the moment is answering that question. What is my duty? Prashant Bhushan says, my duty is the duty which Mahatma Gandhi conceived during his time. I feel in the larger interest of democracy, I must tell the truth. That's his perception of duty. So the deontological theories center, number one, on the action, and to help you decide what is the right answer for that, ask your inner voice the question, what is my duty? Of course, the two most famous theories of duty, the two most famous, one is the Indian text, the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita, as you know, is a chapter in the Mahabharata, And as you know, it has 18 chapters. And the first chapter is the despondency of Arjuna. You're in the battlefield. Arjuna sees all his erstwhile gurus, his own senior people, the elders in the family, so to say, like Dronacharya, who taught him the skill of archery besides the others. Bhishma, who was always considered the father figure, and I'm at war with them. What is my duty? And the entire Bhagavad Gita is trying to, Krishna advising Arjuna on what his duty is. Every chapter is actually pregnant with a lot of meaning. Every stanza is pregnant with a lot of meaning. But the chapters, the first 5 chapters dealing with what is called Karma Yoga, is basically what is my duty. And please do your duty without thinking of the consequences of that duty, without thinking what will happen to you. You just ask yourself, what is my duty at this point of time? And from there comes this beautiful concept in the Bhagavad Gita, often called Nishkama Karma. Nishkama Karma. Do your duty without looking for the rewards, without thinking of the rewards. The other equally important theory, a deontological theory, is the theory put forward by a very famous German philosopher called Immanuel Kant. And Immanuel Kant has written 3 critiques, which every student, irrespective of the subject in which they are specializing, whether you're doing sociology, economics, history, or law, for you to do your subjects well, I will strongly recommend the 3 so-called critiques of Kant must be compulsory reading for all college students. One is called the Critique of Pure Reason. Another is called the Critique of Practical Reason. And the third is called the Critique of Judgment. They're very, very important. As I said, it will improve the way you can understand the world. It will improve your thinking abilities enormously, all these 3 critiques. Anyhow, coming to the ethics portion of it, which is dealt with in the so-called Critique of Practical Reason, Kant gives what is often referred to as the categorical imperative. Never treat a human being merely as a means to an end, but also as a rational end in himself or herself. So in short, the meaning of that is all human beings have actually 2 vocations. One is your profession or career which you choose. Now you're studying. Law students hope to become advocates or something on the legal side. Chartered accountants hope to pursue the profession of chartered accountancy. Engineers pursue the profession of engineering. So that is one career, your profession. But human beings also have another profession, which is referred to as the ontological career. You're born as a human being and eventually you will die. Maybe after 100 years, 120 years, 110 years, whatever it is. So that is why Kant says, never treat a human being merely as a means to an end. You form teams, there are people working with you, under you. So you have to give them instructions, you have to get things done. All that is fine. But while doing that, please don't forget that he or she is also a human being. And as long as that is always in your mind, you will never do anything wrong in terms of the Kant's categorical imperative. A recent example is, we had this lockdown, since the month of March. But I don't have to explain. All of you in some way or the other would have seen how that migrant labor was leaving various cities in India, including Mumbai, and going to the villages in UP and Bihar, etc. Some died on railway track because they didn't even know that railways are running. So the sense of direction was to follow the railway line. Some didn't have meals. Now, when that happens, there's a lot of questions which you have to ask ourselves, because it is a clear violation of the Kantian categorical imperative. You are treating human beings very differently. On the one hand, you had the well-off human beings where special flights were organized to bring them back to India from abroad, even though they had to pay for it, but they were able to pay for it. On the other hand, you didn't really have a plan of action, but thanks to democracy, even though it was delayed very badly, after about 6 weeks or so, they started some trains. That's a kind of a, that would not have happened had we not had democracy, if no voice would be heard. But you can think of your own examples. I'm just giving a recent example because all of you would have experienced. So that is one Kantian formulation. Never treat a human being merely as a means to an end, but also as a rational end in himself. There are other formulations of the Kantian categorical imperative, but I will not go into it because there is a general lecture on ethics, not a class in philosophy. So this is the first category of ethical theories. In the second category of ethical theories, they are called teleological theories or consequentialism theories, where kind of you have options, option A, option B, option C. You work out the pros and cons of each of the options to the best of your ability, and then choose the option which brings maximum happiness to maximum number of people. The most famous theory under this category is often referred to as utilitarianism. This was a theory developed by two people, Bentham, Jeremy Bentham, and thereafter taken forward by John Stuart Mill. By the way, the entire field of economics that most of you study today in colleges, including in your own college or other colleges, what we refer to as mainstream economics. It is mainstream because that is what the majority of the people study today. Otherwise, there's nothing mainstream about it. It's mainstream because that is the majority of the people. That is all based on this concept of utilitarianism. When you talk of demand, supply, everything that goes with it, maximizing utility. How do I maximize utility? All that comes from this concept of utilitarianism, which is the best example of a teleological theory of ethics. A simple argument, let us say, giving the entire benefit of doubt to our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, with whatever was his knowledge of how economics works, etc., perhaps his decision to do demonetization was based on the simplistic concept that the majority of the people in India are not very happy with very rich people because they believe the rich people have made their money through unethical means or improper means. So if I can fish out the black money from them, which they have slashed not only within India by evading taxes, but from abroad, everybody will clap. That could have been either a political strategy or an honest maximum happiness principle use. We don't know. Only God will know. And later on, books of history will make a judgment on this in the 50 years from now. But giving the benefit of doubt, in any case, there is one thing which says that is perhaps correct, and that is the BJP won the Uttar Pradesh elections, which came about 3 or 4 months after demonetization with a massive majority. People did stand in front of banks for 50 days. Some 30, 40 people lost their lives also, but doesn't matter. This is all for a larger good. So theories like that, which do cost benefit and choose the option which gives maximum happiness to maximum number of people. These are the teleological theories of ethics, utilitarianism being the most well-known amongst them. These theories also depend on action. In deontological theory, it was action, but the question was, what is my duty? Here, again, it is action, but what will provide maximum happiness to maximum number of people? There is then a third category, which is different from these two categories, and that is, it doesn't talk of, the focus is not on duty, the focus is not on action, the focus is on character of a human being. All human beings are a mixture of virtues and vices. By and large, you recognize what are your virtues. So try to strengthen your virtues and try to suppress and overcome your vices. So how can I keep on, in an iterative, continuous fashion, improve my character? This set of theories, the first to propound this was Aristotle himself. Aristotelian ethics is based on how to improve character. And there are many other ethical theories based on what was started by Aristotle. That's virtue ethics, where you keep on improving your character, but as Oscar Wilde said, the temptation is always there. As long as I'm not found out, chalega. That's one kind of temptation that comes in human beings. The second kind of temptation that comes is, I've become so great that nobody will dare to question me. In Greek, there is a word for it, note it down later on, go to a dictionary or Google and search it out. It's called hubris, Hubris, hubris. You become so powerful that you actually start believing that I am God. Whatever I'm doing for the good of people. So Mrs. Chanda Kochar is a good example. There's no doubt that she was a lady who built up the ICICI Bank. She had become the icon, particularly for women, how much women can achieve. But with every success, perhaps hubris had started developing. Young officers who join ICICI as a probationary kind of training, they have a training school at Manipal University in Manipal. During Chanda Kochar's days, it seems that university, that training institute, especially funded and part of it in Manipal University for ICICI's new entries, had a big kind of portrait of Chanda Kochar. And professors used to come, first do namaskar to that portrait and then start the classes. That is a kind of hubris which had developed. And you know, her fault was that she was obviously giving loans to companies where her husband was a director, was very intimately involved. And many top consultancies was being given to her brother-in-law. And at the beginning, even the ICICI board defended her. Finally, when public opinion in terms of the media took it up, they had to appoint Justice Sri Krishna to look into it. And the moment Justice Sri Krishna looked into it, the skeletons started dropping out of her closet. Now, that's an example of a virtue problem, that is virtue ethics, that is even though you developed with a good character, this temptation and or hubris caught on and you started making mistakes. Rajat Gupta can be another good example to explain this. Rajat Gupta, as you know, has done fantastic work. He was a simple man from India who went to US and made a dream. He was also, he set up the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. He has done fantastic work. But he had to spend 3 or 4 years in jail because on the offense of insider trading. Again, it's an example of hubris. I'm so great that nobody will point a finger at me. So to summarize, each of this, by the way, are fantastic studies, not my examples, but these theories. When you get time, you can read them. Because when you want to understand a subject, including law, there's a lot of difference between reading only the Constitution of India and reading constitutional history and jurisprudence, which is the basis of the Constitution. To understand the Constitution, after understanding how the doctrine of separation of powers came, how the doctrine of checks and balances evolved, there is a lot of difference between knowing the Constitution and imbibing the constitutional values. And that's a huge difference in the quality of education, depending on these two. And for this, a lot of study of things like ethics are required. This is as far as the theory is concerned. Now coming to the more practical aspect, since I said relevance of ethics and values in personal and professional life. We can again look at it from three kind of ways. One is, there is something called personal ethics. That's personal to you, where you're always ethically right. Or try your best to be ethically right. We have such human beings very much amongst our midst. Right in today's webinar, we have Mr. Julio Ribeiro. Very high personal ethics. You have engineer Shankaran, who built up the Sridharan, I'm sorry, engineer Sridharan, who built up the Konkan Railway, who built up the Delhi Metro. He was just an officer of the Indian Railway Service, Railway Engineering Service, grew up, and after retirement, took this project of the Konkan Railway and thereafter of the Delhi Metro. He's now settled in a small village in Kerala, and in that village, he teaches the Bhagavad Gita. Now, whenever he took an organization, he used to distribute copies of the Bhagavad Gita, not because he was a Hindu, no. He gave it saying, don't treat it as a religious text. Treat it as a text of evolutionary ethics. A living example of that, as I said, high personal ethics. Mr. Narayan Murthy, the person who built up Infosys, will come in that character. One Mr. D.V. Kapoor, who built up the NTPC. They're all alive. Will come in that category. Mr. Asim Premji will come in that category. So in every profession, in every walk of life, you do find people with very high personal ethics. Unfortunately, there are also people who rise up to positions with compromised personal ethics. Recent examples, Mr. R.K. Pachori, who died recently, He built up a fantastic organization called TERI, the Tata Energy Research Institute, which has now been called, the name TERI remains, but instead of Tata has now become the Energy Research Institute. He built it up. He was actually a co-Nobel Prize winner along with that, who was the US Vice President, who has written a lot on climate change. His name slips my mind immediately. He shared the Nobel Prize with him for the fantastic work that he had done on climate change issues. But he had this weakness of chasing skirts. So got involved with sexual harassment cases. And one of his staff complained, and that couldn't be hushed up. That was a compromised personal ethics. I recently gave the example of just now, a few minutes ago, of Chanda Kochar, compromised personal ethics. So personal ethics is very important. The second is professional ethics. Every profession has ethics, whether it is the engineering profession, the medical profession, the legal profession. We are now seeing various compromises in the legal profession because it is high in the agenda. Under Article 76, if I remember from memory, the Attorney General has to be heard. An Attorney General under the Constitution has a right to be heard by any court in India. Maybe a magistrate's court, maybe a tribunal, maybe a high court, maybe a Supreme Court. But a couple of days ago, the Supreme Court refused to hear him, rather cut him short, saying, no, we don't want to hear you. Violation of the Constitution. So there are a lot of compromises on professional ethics in the legal profession. I have personally witnessed compromises in the medical profession, in the engineering profession. Let me share with you some of my experiences on that to explain what is professional ethics. I was Collector Satara during the period 1980 to 1982 for about 2.5 years or 2 years and 8 months or so. The collector's bungalow in Satara is a very palatial bungalow which used to be occupied by the resident of Britain, because Satara was a princely state. As you know, India had British India and princely states. In the princely states, the British only appointed people called residents, otherwise didn't interfere as long as you didn't do anything against the British. So the residence bungalow became the collector's bungalow. It had a huge compound. And my wife and I, every morning, used to sit in the balcony, a large balcony, for a cup of tea, a cup of coffee as soon as we got up. We had police constables on duty. The gate of the collector's bungalow was about 70-80 meters away. You could see the gate from the balcony. And one day when I came out for my cup of coffee after getting up in the morning, I found an old lady wearing a Nawari sari and sitting on all fours on the ground just outside the gate. But she was visible. So I called the constable on duty and asked him in Marathi, who is that lady? Kona hai tere baslele kona hai? Then the constable told me, Sahib, te ratri 10:30 pasun baslele hai. That she has been waiting there since 10:30 in the night. She wanted to meet the collector, but I told her that collector has retired for the day. You can't meet him. Then she said, I will wait here till I am able to meet the collector. So I told the constable, okay, bring her. So she came. The story she told me was very simple. She had come from a village about 50-55 kilometers from Satara. And she had also brought her about 43 or 44-year-old son. She herself must have been in the late 60s. She appeared 68, 69. And she had brought a 43-year-old son who was not there in front of the gate. And what she said was, my son started having severe pain in the stomach. And the pain was so much, I took a bus, ST bus, and came and brought my son to Satara and took him to the civil hospital. And somebody in the civil hospital saw this boy, saw this man rather, 43, 44, even took him to the operation theater, made a small incision, re-stitched it, and told this lady that this is a complicated case. The civil hospital does not have facilities for doing this, but I have my own clinic. Normally for such cases, I charge 40,000 rupees, but considering your how you look and your position, I will charge only 50%, 20,000. But civil hospital has no facilities, so bring him to my clinic after you arrange 20,000. So she took this son to a nearby lodge and made him camp there so that he can spend the night, and then has come walking to the collector's bungalow at about 10:30 in the night. What to do? And she has been sitting there the whole night. So I knew the civil surgeon. There was a gentleman called Dr. Patak, a person from Amravati, who after retirement had settled in Amravati. I knew Dr. Patak. I also knew that he always goes for a game of tennis at about 6:30 in the morning with the executive engineer of the district, a gentleman called Mr. Patwardhan. So Mr. Patwardhan and Mr. Patak used to have a game of tennis every day from about 6:30 to about 7:15, 7:30. By about 7:15, then they'll go back home, have a bath, get dressed, and go to their respective offices. Dr. Patak's normally used to go to the hospital by about 9 in the morning. So I saw the watch. My watch showed 5:45. I said, good, he would not have left home for his game of tennis. So I rang him up and explained to him this is the problem. He said, okay, you just make arrangements to bring that lady and her son, the patient, by about 8 o'clock to the civil hospital. I won't go for tennis today. I'll go early to the civil hospital and I will have a look at him. I'm talking of 1982 or 83, 1983. Those days, Tasildars did not have vehicles of their own. But I knew where my Tasildar of Satara was staying. He was just staying behind the police station, the city police station. So I rang up the city police station and told them to ask the Tasildar to ring me back. A gentleman called Mr. Nelson was the Tasildar. He rang me back within a few minutes. I told him all this. I said, come here in whatever way, take my jeep, take this lady, go to the lodge where this son is staying, then take both of them to the civil surgeon. Civil surgeon will be in hospital by 8 o'clock. He did all that. By about 10:30 in the morning, the civil surgeon rings me up saying the patient is absolutely fine. It was a case of appendicitis, and we do about 7 to 8 appendicitis operations every week in this hospital. So I said, who was this doctor who saw her last night? He said, that was an honorary. You know, all doctors who run private clinics, they don't have beds. They don't have sufficient beds. And medicine is a subject where after doing your MBBS, unless you have inpatients, you stop learning. You can't learn only on OPD. So it is mutually beneficial. It is beneficial to hospitals to have honoraries it is beneficial to honoraries to get attached to hospitals. That practice is there throughout India. It is there in Mumbai, Pune, in all the districts. Anyhow, now to the interesting part of the story. This particular honorary, since he is still alive, I will not mention his name. I believe in the right to privacy. He was a very well-known, respected person of Satara. About 10 days before this incident, my wife and I had gone to his house for a private dinner, where only me and my wife and this doctor and his wife were present, and he had a kind of a daughter and a son who were in high school. So we had a very nice evening, a private dinner at his house. So anyway, I told the civil surgeon, remove him immediately from the honorarieship, and I will make a report to the Indian Medical Council. 1980-81, there was no, this CCTV or too much of press, etc. was not there. By about 11:15, 45 minutes after this particular doctor rings me up. I told him that I'm not going to take a press conference and announce whatever has happened. Of course, I have told the civil surgeon to immediately remove you from the civil hospital in your honorary thing. But I will be making a report to the Indian Medical Council, and it's between you and the Indian Medical Council. After that, I have not kept track. I have not met him thereafter. We are not in touch. I gave this example to explain lack of compromises in professional ethics in the medical profession. I faced another situation in my own job much later. If this happened in 1983, what I'm now going to describe happened in 1997 or 98. I was housing secretary in the government of Maharashtra. A building in the Bandra reclamation area, as you know, during the monsoon season, right now we are having monsoons. During every monsoons, 3-4 buildings fall down because many are old, dilapidated, etc. So when I was housing secretary of the government of Maharashtra during the monsoon time, and the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly was in session, Mr. Manohar Joshi was the Chief Minister of Maharashtra at that time. A building in the Bandra reclamation area fell down. It was a 14-story building, and about 6 people died in that crash. Since the assembly was in session, there was a lot of noise in the assembly. The next morning, the building had fallen late in the evening, around 8:30 in the night, in the evening. So the Chief Minister announced, I'm appointing a one-man commission of the Housing Secretary and directing him to give a report, an interim report within 2 weeks, and a final report within 6 weeks on exactly what has happened. So I got on with the job. So my starting point was, we had a wonderful professor who later became the Vice Chancellor of Mumbai University. His name was Professor Gupchup. He was the head of the Department of Structural Engineering at VJTI. So I rang up Professor Gupchup, and as housing secretary, one is in touch with these engineering departments, etc. So I rang up Professor Gupchup and said, I want your help. Kindly put your people and go ask them to get the debris and start analyzing. From the debris, you can see whether proper cement was used, and even after many years. So I put a few people like that on the job. And then I called the Municipal Commissioner of Bombay to find out who is the additional Municipal Commissioner dealing with building plans. And that name I can mention is a wonderful officer who very recently, till very recently, was Chief Secretary of Maharashtra, Mr. Ajoy Mehta. He at that time, in the year 1998, 97, 98, was the additional Municipal Commissioner of Bombay, amongst other things, also looking after building permissions. So I told Ajay, Ajay, this is the problem. Look into all those files, and by evening, bring those files physically to me. Everything dealing with this. Ajay is an excellent officer, extremely hardworking and excellent. By evening, by 4 o'clock, he was in my office with a large number of files. To cut a long story short, this 14-story building had been built about 14 years before the accident took place. At that time, the architect had given plans for the building. And in those plans, he had said that there is a small water course in that land. So we need what is called pile foundation, which means the building must stand on piles till we hit the earth. He was doing this project for a builder, and he had submitted the plans. Then nothing moved in that file. For almost 7-8 months, nothing has moved after that plan. After about 8 months, a new file has been opened for the same plot, and the same architect has given a new set of plans which were identical to the previous plan, but without the piles. Because piles increases the cost, piling increases the cost enormously. Again, to cut a long story short, in short, since the architect was working for the builder, the architect could be persuaded to change his plans. You don't need to be a Sherlock Holmes to understand there's been some consideration for that. And he makes a plan without the piles. The story doesn't end there. Just like the doctor in Satara, this particular architect was a well-known architect. In fact, his books on repairs, reconstruction, structural engineering were textbooks in VJTI, which was headed by Gupcho. Textbooks for the students of structural engineering. Very popular textbook at that time. I made a complete report on what has happened. But unlike the doctor, this particular architect, a famous architect, I met him face to face. What was the occasion? Much after retirement, when I was working as chairman of the Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission, I get a summons from the civil court, from the criminal court in Mazgaon, the Mazgaon JMFC's court or something, asking me to appear for giving evidence in this particular case. Which means based on my report, things have moved slowly. Prosecutions had been initiated, amongst others, against this architect also. And the case hearings have commenced. And I became a key witness since I had given that report. I did go. The way it works in courts is that they let you have a look at your files just before the hearing for inspection. So normally when you look at the file, you remember exactly what has happened. As I said, this happened in 1998, and I was giving evidence sometime in 2010 or 2011. That is about 14 years after this. Just like the building fell after 14 years, my evidence against the architect was also after 14 years. That's the kind of delays in our judicial system. But I gave evidence, and I spent about 2.5 hours my examination in chief. I was vigorously cross-examined and I answered all the cross-examination questions. And this architect by that time had become quite old, but he was there. I exchanged greetings with him also. So this is a case of an architect compromising on his professional ethics. I think my entire time will be taken up if I start giving all such examples. So I'll stop at these two examples just to explain what is professional ethics. And it's very, very important that doing a profession without ethics is like prostitution. A prostitute sells her body. A person who takes extraneous things into consideration before taking a decision sells his soul. So there is no difference. And yet, well, the world is full of such people. That doesn't mean there are no honest people. I think there are many, many honest people too. So professional ethics means you can't compromise on your professional judgment. Nobody can say that this particular architect didn't know that pile foundation was essential. He has written textbooks. But what was the temptation? As I said, in return for a few pieces of silver or gold, whatever it is, or you will be an architect for all our jobs in the future, the builder says. It can be of various forms. In government, I've seen officers being offered admissions in Harvard and Columbia and Ivy League universities for the children in return for favors to them. So this quid pro quo can take various forms. Sometimes, when you're really good in your profession, you can be told that you're so good and you'll get invited for conferences abroad with airfare paid for. So there are various forms in which quid pro quos take place. In Sanskrit, there is a word called sthitak prajna. If your feet is firmly on the ground, you will not get angry, but you will not waver when these temptations come in front of you. And it will come in all professions. That's what I mean by professional ethics. Third is organizational ethics. Organizational ethics, by and large, depend on the personal ethics of the top management. Infosys had good ethics because Narayan Murthy had good personal ethics. There is a case in Wipro.
Sir, your audio went off.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sorry for that small interruption. Somebody was making a FaceTime call. So I was talking of, I'm telling you about this Azim Premji in Wipro. There was an outstanding engineer who, because of his team, was making a lot of money for the organization. He was doing very well. But he had a small weakness, and that weakness was claiming false taxi bills. You have to visit your clients. So suppose you have spent 200 rupees or 300 rupees for going from your place of work to the client's place. While claim it as 600 rupees, double that. The moment this came to Azim Premji's notice, he dismissed him with whatever was his terminal benefits. Take this 3 months pay, you need not come from tomorrow. That because if you look the other way, after all, he's doing so good for the organization, you do a great damage to the organizational ethics of the organization. So organizational ethics is not tolerating any deviation. It sends a good message. Please remember, in organizations, decisions taken at the top is not only a decision, but sends a strong signal to the rest of the organization. Human beings are not fools. They know what is happening in the organization. The fact that nobody talks about it doesn't mean they don't know. So every decision of the top management is not merely a decision in a particular case. It's a signal of what? A signal to the rest of the organization about the values we believe in. It's true in an educational institution. It is true in a university. It is true both in the private sector, public sector, government. That's where leadership comes. If the top is good, if the personal ethics of the top management is good, the organizational ethics will always be good. Similarly, if the top management changes, organizations which had very good organizational ethics can stumble and go into bad days when the top management changes. With Infosys, it was about to happen. All of you would have seen that. There was this gentleman called Sikka. Once again, if you ask me to name 10 persons who are experts in artificial intelligence in the entire globe, Sikka's name will come. Sikka did his engineering from Baroda, if I remember, then went to a university in the US, later did his PhD at Stanford when artificial intelligence was just at its basis, and worked with the professor who kind of invented artificial intelligence. And today he's one of the topmost minds in artificial intelligence. But he didn't do anything purposely. During his time, the bottom line of Infosys, turnover of Infosys improved fantastically. He settled things. Like his CFO wanted to leave. So he gave him a bonus much higher than what his contract provided for. Take a le jao. In return, only keep your mouth shut. So without considering what is it going to be the impact on others, the value system which had been built up by Narayan Murthy and Nilankani was getting destroyed. But since many people knew, they were kind of telling Narayan Murthy. Narayan Murthy told the board, wrote to them, they didn't respond. Finally, Narayan Murthy was forced to write against his own organization in the newspapers, an organization to which he has given birth. And then Sikka finally had to leave. And Narayan Murthy requested Nilankani in the interim to take over till proper arrangements are made. So organizational ethics, I repeat, have a lot to do with ethics at the top. Now, since most of you sitting in front of me or rather in this webinar are from law colleges, not all, but the majority of you, I think I should also tell you what's the difference between ethics and law. Please remember, the law sets the minimum standards of behavior, while ethics sets the maximum standards of behavior. So ethics is much larger than law. Law is enforceable. That's the minimum that is expected to be followed. But ethics is a much larger concept. So you can be you can be legally right, but ethically wrong. And some of these are very, very great dilemmas. There are no straightforward yes and no answer. You have to find your own answer. Like in a market economy, profiteering is legally right because based on utilitarianism and mainstream economics, price is determined by what the market can afford to pay. I know when I was working as chairman MERC, we had a power plant set up by Mr. Naveen Jindal in Chhattisgarh, 1,250 megawatts, a few power plants together. And it so happened by a stroke of luck and accident that all these power plants got commissioned early in 2009. And there were general elections in 2009. So during general elections, political parties in power always tell the electricity boards, you ensure that there is no load shedding. Everybody should get electricity. Buy electricity at whatever it may cost you. So again, to cut a long story short, Naveen Jindal's plants at a place called Tamner in Chhattisgarh, the cost of producing electricity at the generation bus was about 1 rupee 80 paise a unit. On an average, this electricity was being sold at 14 rupees a unit. Even if you add the after generation, there is transmission and distribution, the electricity and a reasonable profit for you, the electricity could easily have been sold at about 2 rupees 80 paise. Instead of that, it was being sold at 14 rupees. By the way, legally it is right. Market economy, there is demand. Demand has gone up because of elections. And state governments are providing money to state electricity boards. Legally right. But is profiteering, can you make that much profit? No straightforward answer. These are more difficult questions to answer. Perhaps it is, you answer it yourself. Is it ethically right or ethically wrong? There can be things which are ethically right, but legally wrong. An example which comes to my mind immediately is, some of you may be aware of it. I think this happened about 5 or 6 years ago. So you may be aware, you may not be aware. You see, Ireland is a country where abortion is strictly prohibited by law. Abortion, it's a Catholic country, and abortion is strictly prohibited in Ireland. There was an Indian lady who got pregnant and ready for and she had to be hospitalized because of some complications. And the doctors, not one, a team of doctors decided the only method of saving that woman was to abort the child, the baby. But since the law against abortion was very strict in Ireland, nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to do it. Now that is a situation where the ethically right thing to do was to abort the child, to save the woman. Here, since the law was so strong and no doctor wanted to take the risk, not even a team of doctors, they let the woman die. Now, I don't really remember what happened to the baby. Whether both died or the baby was saved, I don't remember. But I'm giving this as an example to that things can be ethically right but legally wrong. So you must understand the difference between ethics and law. But a simple thing is what I stated earlier, law sets the minimum standards of behavior while ethics sets maximum standards. In short, being ethical means being a good human being. I will end what I want to say by repeating what Kant had said, or your two vocations, your career, your profession, and your ontological vocation as a human being. So that is also a struggle. It is not as straightforward. But you will do very well in your profession also. You will do very well as a human being also if you're a good human being. If you're a good human being, you spiritually grow as a human being. And whatever profession you're doing also, you will be fine. That reminds me of some, there are 3 poems. Or before I come to the poem, let me take one more minute. There are some instances that happen in your life which have a huge impact on your life. I would like to narrate one such instance. Again, this happened when I was Collector Satara. The previous principal of Wilson College, Mumbai, his name was Dr. Iron. After retirement, I didn't know him. After retirement, he had come and settled in Satara. He had 2 daughters, and he started an educational academy in Satara called the Narmada Education Academy. One day, he sent a message. He came to my office and sent a slip that he would like to see me. I called him in, and his simple problem was this. Zilla Parishad is to release money every month to the school, or once in 3 months or so, as grants for running the school. And the Zilla Parishad, the last quarter money had not been released. And he says he has pleaded with the education officer a number of times. He has gone and met him, and the money is not getting released. Then he told me with a slightly reduced voice, "Sir, I know the reason. They had given me 4 names to admit these people in the school. I couldn't oblige because we have a laid down system of admissions which is very transparent and straightforward. So these 4 cases which had come from the recommendation of the education officer, I couldn't oblige. And that is why the money is being held." Even though I was seeing him for the first time, from his looks, face, and the sincerity with which he mentioned the entire thing, I just told my PA, connect me to the education officer, and told him I want this money to be released within 48 hours and compliance reported to me. I was firm, nothing more. And the money was released. That's how I got to know Dr. Iron. Thereafter, during my stay in Satara, there were 2 or 3 occasions when he invited me as a chief guest for annual day of that school or some other function of the school, etc. Then I got transferred out of Satara, went to various places in Bombay, came to Bombay after that. But whenever Dr. Iron used to come to Bombay, not whenever, occasionally, whenever he came, he used to look me up, often in my office, just to say hi, a little bit of courtesy talk. I used to give him a cup of tea, and that's it. Then much later, when I was Secretary to Government in the government of Maharashtra, I had got to know the family, Iron, his wife, and 2 daughters who were all grown-up daughters. Both of them were spinsters, and they were running the school. And I think he had one more daughter, and son-in-law was also teaching in Wilson College. Now he has immigrated to the US. So one day he came and told me that Mrs. Iron has passed away. And then he showed me it seems towards the end, last few days, she couldn't speak, but she could still write, not very clearly, but scribble something. And the last thing which she had scribbled on a piece of paper, which according to Dr. Iron happened about 10 minutes before she breathed her last. She had written in Marathi, Shakke tevda kela, thou sampli. I did whatever I could. The race is over. Shakke tevda kela, thou sampli. Let me tell you, this sheet of paper, which Dr. Iron himself, when he showed it to me, was perhaps 86 or 87, had a huge impact on my mind. I said, if one has to die, that's the way one has to die. So there are also instances in life which do happen to every human being, which can have a lot of impact. So ethics is a very interesting subject. It's worth sticking to values. That does not mean that you will never make mistakes. That does not mean that you will not commit some indiscretions. But you can move forward. And all good ethics is, if you follow good ethics, good values, you will not only become good human beings, you will always do very well in your professions. Thank you. I think now I'll take questions. Any questions? Vignesh? I have not been looking at chat boxes, so I don't know what questions have come in the chat box, etc.
Sir, I think Vignesh is having an issue.
Yes,
A
sir.
little
Sir, am I
louder,
audible?
could hear you.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Introduce yourself and then ask the question.
Sir, Vignesh here. Sir, I'll be. Sir, just a minute, sir. Shivam, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So there is one question from one of the participants.
Yeah.
Sir, do you think moral education has to be compulsory subject till standard 7 to build our ethics?
I really don't know. You see, perhaps it has some impact. You get to know some subject. Like, if I look back at my own life, I learned a lot of prayers, Sanskrit prayers, thanks to my grandfather. Every day in the evening, one had to recite prayers and repeat them. So that is a kind of a moral education. And even in school, we used to have the morning prayers and something used to be read out. And I went to St. Stephen's College in Delhi, where even in college, there used to be some reading from the Bible every day. And we were only 900 students in those days in St. Stephen's, starting from first year to, so everybody could be accommodated in a hall. And the day always started with morning prayers. But I don't have a straightforward answer to your question. I think on any case, you get a lot of information. Religion does play an important part, because please remember, science is something which developed over the last 300, 350 years. Prior to that, education basically meant spiritual education. And religions have always played an important part when it comes to ethics. Even capitalism, I gave you this example of profiteering. But capitalism in the initial 7, 8, 9 decades worked very well. People made money, people made profits. And the main reason for that is, that was the age when the best capitalists were the so-called white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And part of the religious thought was influenced by what is called Calvinism, which is, it is good to make money, it is good to make the society rich. But along with that, the benefits you get from that should not be any more than the benefits that the rest of society will get from it. That was a very strong religious teaching. There is a book written by a sociologist called Max Weber, Protestant Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism. You must read that. In today's world, perhaps we are living in a different kind of world where the influence of religion, generally speaking, I won't say that has completely come down, but perhaps relatively speaking has come down. So you need some other thoughts to get there. That reminds me, the 3 poems which have had a great influence on me. One is this poem of Rabindranath Tagore, Gitanjali, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free. I won't repeat it. All of you, I'm sure, know it. But please remember, ethically, it is an important thing. Rabindranath Tagore makes it very clear that real ethics is humanism. And nationalism is an enemy of humanism. Nationalism, which is often propagated politically with a view to create a certain consensus, make it ethical to kill people from another country. Now, Rabindranath Tagore completely objects to it. It is humanism. Religion has 2 dimensions. One dimension is your relationship with God, a vertical dimension. Another dimension is your relationship with other human beings, the horizontal dimension. The philosophy of all religions is that mankind is one. Hinduism, in its kernel, has these Mahavakyas, Aham Sivoham, Tattvamasi, you're one. The Bhagavad Gita is based on Sankhya philosophy. The moment you realize that you're Purusha and not Prakriti. So the oneness of mankind is what is preached by all religions. Politics, use of religion as politics is a different ballgame. There is a huge difference between Hindutva and Hinduism. Hinduism does not discriminate with all religions. Read the complete works of Swami Vivekananda to understand religion. He's a Hindu. But you'll get a real sense of Hinduism. Read Swami Vivekananda or read the works of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the guru of Swami Vivekananda. So, to answer your question, Vignesh, religion has an influence, but how it is taught, how deep you go into it, all that matters. By just making it compulsory may serve some purpose, but I don't know.
Okay, sure, sir. So we have another question from one of the participants. When ethics, both personal and professional, are so important, why are there not something which would emphasize on ethics in education? And so, what are your views in regards with it?
You see, basically, as I said, irrespective of the education that you're going through, literacy and education are 2 different things. To be able to read, write, and speak is not education. That is necessary, but that is not education. That is not sufficient. You should be able to think on your own. So for example, in the best Western universities in the world, irrespective of whether I did physics, but irrespective of whether you did do physics or chemistry or anything, as a freshman and sophomore, you have to study the history of Western civilization, compulsory. So if you're a university graduate, a certain minimum can be assumed. Any university graduate from Oxford, Cambridge, or the Ivy League universities of America, you can assume that they would have studied the dialogues of Plato. They would have studied the novels of Charles Dickens. They would have studied Milton. They would have studied poetry. Physics students, there used to be courses called poetry for physicists. And for literature students, there used to be courses today called science for literature students. So education is more than literacy. And if you really get educated, these questions will get answered in every individual mind as you progress. If you read the Upanishads talks about a concept called neti neti, not this, not this. That can happen only in your mind. So getting a degree is not education. The fact that I have a BSc degree, an MA degree, a law degree, I'm not poo-pooing it. It's required, but it's not sufficient. You have to think on your own. I told you about the importance of reading Kant's 3 critiques: the critique of pure reason, the critique of practical reason, and the critique of judgment. The critique of pure reason deals with how come mathematics is possible? How come there are laws of nature? Not whether mathematics is possible. We all know it is. That entire book, after reading it, the conclusion he comes to is mathematics and the natural sciences are possible because space and time are part of the subjective apparatus, not part of the objective world. The point, it may be right, it may be wrong. These are often referred to as the Copernicus revolution in philosophy. That is, you have to take care that in the name of education, you don't become a frog in the well. You must know the world outside your own well. Unfortunately, a very, very embarrassingly large number of educated people become frogs in their own well. They become dogmatic. Good education can never make a human being dogmatic. It will always make a human being tolerant. It will make a human being like a small child who will continue to look at new facts with wonder and excitement, with always a feeling that I may be wrong. So we have a long way to go to really become educated. I'm not saying we can do a lot in terms of improving the quality of education. And this can come from any kind of education. I'm not saying that everybody should study Plato. You can study the Upanishads. You can study the Quran. You can study the Bible. But you go into the depth of it. Okay? Next
Yes,
question.
Yes, sir. So we have another question from Indrani, ma'am. The question is how to inculcate ethics in students.
I think best is to inculcate the reading habit. The reading habit should be inculcated because that is the hallmark of a good education. But the question is, there is so much what to read. So read the classics. What is a classic? There are hundreds and thousands of books which are written, which become popular for a few years, then forgotten. A classic is a book which your parents would have read, you will read, your children will read, your grandchildren will also read. The Upanishads are classics. Shakespeare's plays are classics. Charles Dickens' novels are classics. If you're studying economics, the work of Adam Smith or the work of John Maynard Keynes is a classic. So every subject has classics. Study the classics. So some kind of, so that all that is possible only through a reading habit. Passing exams by reading a few textbooks, no, that's not sufficient. That's simply not sufficient. Your thinking develops when you read originals. If you want to think like an economist, you must read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. You must read Karl Marx's Das Kapital. You must read The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money by Keynes. You can't start thinking in economics by only studying a textbook in economics. And same is true of every subject. Read the classics. Develop a reading habit. Ethics will automatically come. Ethics is a part of all this. By the way, Adam Smith, who is considered the father of what we now call as mainstream economics, has written another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. You can never understand Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations unless you've also read The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And The Theory of Moral Sentiments is actually a book of ethics. When I talked about profiteering and why the early capitalists did not profiteer even though they made money and reasonable profits, it is because of things like the theory of moral sentiments. So ethics is the journey itself. It is not a destination. You complete this course and now we certify that you're good in ethics. No, it's the journey itself. Next question.
Yes, sir. So the next question is by Mrs. Vedika. Can one specialize in ethics?
Certainly you can. I mean, that's a field of specialization of in the subject of philosophy. But you know, I must make one thing clear. In today's world, most of the job market depends either on the STEM subjects, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or the professions like medicine, engineering, etc. That's where the jobs are. And that's where the jobs will be, at least in the next 20 years. So people who don't belong to a leisure class, who have to make a living, it's difficult to make a living by studying philosophy. Do it as a hobby. Study of ethics, as I said, should be done as a hobby. But if you take it as a specialization, well, there aren't too many jobs for philosophy professors as compared to professors of engineering and professors of mathematics or even professors of law.
Yes, sir. So we have one last question, which is that in today's time when cynicism is considered practicality, how does one hold on to the ethical side?
Good question. What is cynicism? That is, you're more or less lost. You say, let me just kind of float along with the spirit of the times. You're living, but actually you're dead. Cynicism is an area where you're just floating along. That is okay, life is going on, you're getting up every day in the morning, you're having your breakfast. It is time-filling activity. But if you want excitement in your mind, and my advice is, if you're passionate about anything, if you're passionate about your profession, let's say many of you are lawyers or budding lawyers, you must read you must understand the entire hearing. what is this judgment of uh, the 3 judges of the Supreme Court? What is the affidavit filed by Prashant Bhushan? Look at both of it together. Does the 108-page judgment answer the questions raised by Prashant Bhushan? The moment you go deep when you get passionate. And it works, it's like a round circle. When you become passionate, you start looking up. You'll then look at the Constitution. You'll say freedom of speech. From where did it come? What does the United Nations Charter for Human Rights say? What does Locke say about it? What does Montesquieu say about it? What is the history, constitutional history? How was the Indian Constitution made out of the 1935 Government of India Act? The more you ask questions, the deeper you will go. I gave some examples from law because the majority of you are from the law school. But you can give such examples on everything. That is, never be satisfied with superficial knowledge. The moment you want to keep on asking why, you will never become cynical. Because you get excited. You want to understand more. You sleep with it literally. Next morning, yesterday I had this idea. Let me look at it. You people are lucky because you can do a Google search on most things. During our days, we had to actually physically go to a library. Now let me tell you again, I was a student of physics. How did I get interested in subjects like ethics or philosophy or economics? It's economics which I teach these days at JBIMS. The reason is, when I was doing physics at Columbia University, there is a beautiful theorem in physics. I only state, for every conservation law, there is a symmetry in the universe. Energy is conserved because the laws of physics are invariant in time. Momentum is conserved because the laws of physics are invariant in space. If I do an experiment in Mumbai, I can do the same experiment in New York or London or Chennai. I'll get the same result. That's invariance in space. So I went to my professor one day and asked him, sir, I'm very excited about this. And a simple question which I asked him, and this was 1970, so I'm 22 years of age. I asked him, sir, are conservation laws more fundamental to understand the universe, or is symmetry more fundamental to understand the universe? He got up from his desk in his room, and he had a shelf of, a shelf full of books. He picked up a book and gave it to me and said, read this book. And after you're finished reading it in a week or two, come back and we will discuss it further. And the book he gave me was The Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. And this being given to me by a physics professor. And it was a magnificent journey. So my only advice is, never be satisfied with superficiality. Keep on asking questions. Why? And the moment you do that, you will find the time. And not merely you, citizenship will improve. Your role as a citizen will improve. The nation improves. The country improves. When you take whatever you're studying, that is education. The first part is only literacy. And literacy you will forget. When I was chairman MERC, I used to interview young people for recruitment to my organization. Of course, what we wanted was electrical engineers. And I used to have people who got very high marks in electrical engineering. And when I asked them a question like, what is the difference between resistance and impedance? They will say, sir, we passed our exams 5 years ago. Abhi yaad nahi hai. How can you be electrical engineer and not answer what is the difference between resistance and impedance. Then give them a hint, what is induction, what is capacitance. So this problem, as a nation, we are facing this problem, according to me, in every educational field. We are too superficial in our educational system. That is why in the best 200 institutes of higher education in the entire world, at best a few IITs come, that also in the rank of 195 to 200. Somebody may say this is a Western propaganda. No, there are very large number of Chinese universities in that. There are very large number of Korean universities in that. Very large number of Japanese universities in that, in the list of 200. Why only a few IITs and the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore? Nothing else finds a place. So we have to pull ourselves up with our own bootstraps. We must understand, we have to compare, we have to benchmark ourselves with the best in the world. That's when educational standards will go. Then automatically we get thinking adults. And the moment you have thinking adults, you attain sthita prajna. That is, you can't be purchased with small temptations, because you'll automatically see the ephemeral nature of those temptations. Your feet become firmly on the ground. So that has to come through real deep education. Any other question?
Thank you so much, sir.
So we'll proceed with the vote of thanks now.
Okay. That's
thank
called
you.
the guillotine. The guillotine has been applied. Like the speaker's prerogative. You stop discussions with the guillotine. So Shivam has applied the guillotine. Yes, we'll respect it.
Thank you so much, sir. So I'd like to extend firstly my vote of thanks to our speaker, Mr. VP Raja, sir, for giving his insights about this topic of ethics. Further, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude, and I would like to thank our principal, sir, Dr. Ajay Patil, sir, for his constant support. I would also like to thank our assistant registrar, ma'am, Asha Patil, ma'am, and our faculty in charge, Professor Purnima Surve, ma'am, for their constant support and guidance throughout the webinar. I would also like to thank Mr. Shivam Jain Kakadia, sir, for his constant support, and last but not the least, the participants for being a very, very interactive participants, and all the staff and the PCGT trustees. Thank you so much, everyone.
Shivam, now that we have Mr. Ribeiro here and the principal of the college here, we'd like to hear them for a few minutes.
Yes, sir, definitely.
The principal of the college.
Vignesh, is he here?
Or Mrs. Purnima Surve, if she's there, the faculty coordinator.
Purnima ma'am, would you like to say something?
Hello, good evening, sir. Hello, sir, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, sir. Sir, good evening. Thank you so much for such an informative lecture. And it was like really a pleasure to have you here, sir. And our students are so happy because in between the messages, I was reading each and every messages, and they were so happy with your lecture, sir. Because when you were explaining everything, you were taking day-to-day examples. And that makes the thing very, very easy for the students to understand when you correlate with day-to-day examples, sir. So we were very happy, sir, again. Last time we had Ribeiro, sir, also for a great lecture, sir, and it was also a very nice lecture, sir. Principal, sir, has said, especially, sir, has said sorry today because sir is having some network issues in his native place, sir. But sir would definitely get in touch with you regarding the same, sir. Thank you so much once again, sir, for such an informative lecture, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
And I thank the PCGT team also, sir, because last time also we had a wonderful lecture, sir. And we would like to see you again in many more webinars. We would like to invite you, sir, for the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't
Thank you.
think we would have been able to organize such events without your guidance and support. So thank you for guiding the students, our campus ambassadors at DY Patil College of Law, not just Vignesh, but Shreya and others as well. I would now request Ribeiro sir to say a few words. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Shivam, you'll be able to unmute him from your host.
Sir, I'm trying that. So you will see a pop-up on your screen, which will say ask to unmute. Can you see that, sir? Yes, sir, you'll have to click on that because I can only ask to unmute you. I cannot unmute you. So did you get anything on your screen? Any option? Vignesh, is there any way that we can unmute sir directly?
Sir, actually, we just can send a notification, sir.
That's what I did. Ask to unmute. Okay, no worries then. I think we will end the webinar here. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. Thank you, sir. Bye.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to see the 167 participants. I'm always
total
available to all of you
participants were
at any time.
220, sir. So maximum participants we reached today were 220.
220, is it? Okay.
220, sir. I have taken the screenshots of that for our record also, and the recording also we'll be sending it to our management, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
sir. Thank you, Mr. Ribeiro. Thanks
Thank
all
you,
the
sir.
faculty and the students.
Yes. Vignesh, you have not sent the link, feedback link?
Ma'am, I'll send it across now.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Purnima ma'am. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ribeiro, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the permission to leave.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Vignesh, you're sending across the link?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'll send it in 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
ma'am.
And thank you everyone for attending the lecture.